You're the king's firstborn son, and what they know, what everyone in the realm knows.
Hi, this is Simon Candlish. Prince Aegon Targaryen origins, grasping and pervy prince who ascends the Iron Throne. The members of a royal family come in many flavours. Some are great warriors who conquer and claim their own kingdom off the strength of their backs, like Robert Baratheon. Some are scholars who spend their time poring over histories and mysteries as opposed to leading their realm from the front, like King Errricc I. Others had a reputation as black as the denizens of Flea Bottom, like Prince Aerion Brightflam, who drank wildfire in hopes of transforming into a dragon himself. Maegor's cruelty, Baela's blessed foolishness, heck, even King Joffrey Baratheon's appetite for violence and torture were stains upon the legacy of the Iron Throne. But the first king to share the name of the conqueror himself outdid them all, with his bloodlust, promiscuity, and sheer greed. The histories of Westeros would forever describe him as a grasping king, and his legacy is so conflicted that he is counted amongst the worst Targaryen's kings by Grand Maester Caith in his Lives of Four Kings, right beside Maegor and Aenys. He is the firstborn son of Alicent Hightower and one of two claimants to the Iron Throne in House of the Dragon. This is Prince Aegon Targaryen's origins, explored. And spoiler alert, because there will be a lot of those in this video. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The legacy of the name Aegon up until King Viserys' reign. The legacy of the name Aegon was, to put it mildly, too large to live up to. The first Targaryen in the history of the unified Seven Kingdoms to be named Aegon was the one who united them after all. After assisting Pentos and the daughters of Valyria in their efforts against the Tigers of Volantis, Lord Aegon Targaryen of Dragonstone convened a meeting at his seat, summoning all his vassals and lesser lords. After deliberating a course of action for untold hours and days, he wrote a message intended for the lowest landed knights to the highest of high lords and kings. Lord Aegon had long felt that the Seven Kingdoms were one realm meant for one ruler, and his mind, he was to be that ruler. A cloud of ravens burst forth from the ravenry at Dragonstone with Aegon's proclamation, and he landed his armies at the mouth of Blackwater Rush with his measly vassals to begin a military campaign that strategists analyse to this day. After subduing Roseby and Stokeworth and smashing houses Darklyn and Mouton in his first test, Aegon was crowned with the circlet of Valyrian steel, studded with rubies by his sister wife Visenya, and declared king of all Westeros and shield of his people by his other sister wife Rhaenys. He would continue to wear this crown throughout his reign, with it being associated with the conqueror's legacy after his death. Having established a sizable presence in the Crown Lands, he used the Aegon Fort as a base to make his next move. Prince Aegon Targaryen managed to gain the loyalty of the River Lords when he burned Harren the Black and ended House Hall from Balerions Black. Aegon's wife, Rhaenys, secured the Stormlands for him, whilst his other wife ensured the submission of the Vale of Arryn. The Conquerors Three burned the armies of King Loren Lannister and King Mern Gardner, the ninth, in a conflict that is still called the Field of Fire. Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes claimed the lives of thousands of soldiers and left many more with burn injuries. King Mern died alongside all of his sons, ending House Gardner, and King Loren gave up his crown after defeat to accept his new title as Warden of the West under the new Targaryen King of Westeros. All this Aegon managed to accomplish in about 3 years, which is insane if you think about the size and scale of Westeros. It would have been impossible if he did not have dragons, and King Aegon was aware of the fact that despite winning the kingdoms, his hold over them was tenacious at best. Aegon Targaryen was the first High King of all Seven Kingdoms, and so anything he did, said, and accomplished became a benchmark for future Targaryen kings to follow. Before he launched his invasion, the Targaryen family did not have a custom of heraldry. In Old Valyria, the structure of governance was a freehold of 40 families, and so royal symbols and signs weren't exactly commonplace. Aegon created the three-headed Targaryen sigil to show the lords and kings of Westeros that he was a part of their land, and not the foreigner they so obviously thought him to be, because Aegon was the bearer of the Valyrian steel sword, Blackfire. The bastard sword became an important symbol of a king's legitimacy. It is said that every future Targaryen king, worthy or unworthy, has borne the sword until it was lost during the chaos of the 5 Blackfire rebellions. After Aegon had united 6 of the 7 kingdoms under his rule and been coroneted at Oldtown, he commissioned the creation of the Iron Throne, the most prominent symbol of his conquest and rule. A monstrous, ugly and dangerous seat created with the blades taken from Aegon's fallen enemies. According to the songs, the Iron Throne was made out of 1,000 blades and forged in Balerian's breath, but the histories claim it was the work of armourers. The Dragon King would hold royal progresses annually, dedicated half an entire year to them, and travel everywhere with 6 maesters to inform him about that particular land's customs, traditions and histories. During these progresses, the sight of the king instilled faith in the Iron Throne amongst the small folk, while the sight of Balerion discouraged any thoughts of rebellion. Aegon ruled over the 7 kingdoms for 37 judicious years and welcomed 2 children, Aenys and Maegor, as well as several grandchildren from Aenys's marriage to Alyssa Velaryon. Aegon's first grandson was named after him, but while himself would be remembered in antiquity as a mythical ruler and unifier, his descendants would have a hard time keeping a hold of his legacy, especially the ones who were named after him. When King Aenys ascended the throne after Aegon's death, his son Aegon became the heir to the Iron Throne, but he would never ascend it. Aenys's weak rule and mismanagement of the 4 rebellions that broke upon his ascension eventually led to his own death in 42 AC, after which Prince Aegon Targaryen should have become the 3rd Targaryen and 2nd Aegon to become King of all Westeros. Instead, he was usurped by his uncle Maegor, whose rule was marked by such tyranny that he is remembered as Maegor the Cruel. And Maegor's tyranny, as with most things Targaryen, began with his family. After King Aenys's death, Aegon had to flee the Casterly Rock and see his children born and his kingdom burnt. Maegor's campaign against the Faith Militant had savaged the Riverlands and the Westerlands, with the king now holding court in Oldtown to judge the faithlessness of the faith towards his reign. Prince Aegon and his sister wife snuck into the capital to get dragons for their side, with Aegon claiming his father's dragon Quicksilver and Rhaena reuniting with Dreamfire. Aegon then gathered men in the Riverlands and marched on his uncle's forces, but his inexperience in combat and sheer lack of strength were his undoing. Aegon did not split his host of 15,000 men into 3 groups to fight off advancing royalist forces, as he should have, and was killed by his uncle in the end. Maegor fell upon his nephew, and Balerion ripped one of Quicksilver's wings off, ensuring both rider and dragon would die, and giving Maegor the black distinction of becoming a kinslayer. After this death, it was as if the name Aegon was cursed, because at least the next 2 generations of Targaryen children would have no Aegons live long enough to become a king, even in minority. When King Jaehaerys ascended the Iron Throne, he had no living heirs of his own body, so he named his niece Aeria, his heir. That changed when Queen Alicent got pregnant in 51 AC. Jaehaerys was confident that his first child will be his heir for the rest of his life. Prince Aegon Targaryen died 3 days after his birth because his delivery was far too premature, and the same fate would follow the next generations as well. Jaehaerys and Alicent would have 13 children, but only 7 of them would live beyond their adolescence, and none would be named Aegon again. Jaehaerys' second son and second heir, Balon, would marry his sister Alyssa, and together they'd have 3 children, with their third being named Aegon as well. But the difficult labour left Alyssa too weakened to recover, and she died within that year. The prince perished the year after that, just shy of his first name day. So after the death of Aegon the Uncrowned, it took nearly 60 years for another Aegon to be born and survive infancy. Sadly, when this did, his personality and his lineage in itself became the cause of one of the worst wars in Westerosi history. The firstborn son of a second wife and third in line to the throne, Prince Aegon Targaryen's birth and early years. Prince Aegon Targaryen was born in 107 AC to King Viserys and his second wife, Queen Alicent Hightower. He was Viserys' first child by Alicent, 4th overall, and was named by his mother after Aegon the Conqueror. The king already had a 10-year-old daughter by the time young Aegon was born, and the prince had 2 deceased elder brothers in the form of Viserys' first stillborn through Aemma, and his second son, Balon, whose birth would take both Aemma and the baby's lives. A year before Viserys married Alicent, he had named Rhaenyra his official heiress and put her in line to ascend the Iron Throne. This move violated the precedent that had been put forth by the Great Council of 101 AC, which stated that a woman would not inherit the Iron Throne in the absence of any direct male heirs. But it was accepted by hundreds of lords of the realm regardless, as it was their king's command. For 2 years, the princess enjoyed undivided attention as the only royal child in contention for becoming queen. But after Aegon's birth, that all changed rather quickly. It is mostly agreed that there are 2 broad categories of lords in the 7 kingdoms: those who are beholden to their vows and those who are beholden to nothing but their own ambition. The former kind tends to take their oaths and honours a shade more seriously than the latter, and the latter kind tends to only take their oath seriously when it serves their personal interests. Prince Aegon's birth saw a weird clash of both these schools of thought. As being the firstborn son of the king, he should have been the front-runner for the title of heir. But because he is the son of Rhaenyra's second wife, primogeniture favoured Rhaenyra, and so did their own father. Before Queen Aemma's death, Viserys had not named an official heir. His brother Daemon was his presumed heir, given that he was the closest living male blood relative, and the king himself seemed to content with waiting until he had a son of his own. When Queen Aemma died, he must have realised that securing the succession was not as simple as he was thinking it to be, and so he had named Rhaenyra his heir, not really thinking about getting remarried. Now that he was, and also had not 1 but 3 male heirs of his own, he did nothing to change the matter of succession, and this caused a major rift between his 2 families. On one hand was the party of the princess, who were devoted to their vows and determined to uphold her rights. On the other hand was the party of the queen, who were devoted to the laws of the land and wanted to see Aegon elevated to that post. When he was 4 years old, Aegon became an unwitting member of Queen Alicent's Greens. After his mother wore a green gown to her 5-year anniversary feast and would spend most of his formative years reconciling his assigned role with the one his mother wanted for him. Because by the time Aegon was 4, not only had he become an elder brother to Helaena and Aemond, he had also become Alicent's first choice for ascending to the Iron Throne. After giving Viserys 2 healthy sons, the queen began questioning why the king did not set his daughter aside for her son in accordance with all the laws of the land. And this is how Aegon started resenting his stepsister and her kin for stealing his birthright. When Aegon was only 2 years old, his grandfather had already pushed for his ascension to the throne, so much that it earned him a dismissal from his office of Hand of the King. When he turned 6, he was put forth by Alicent as the perfect match for Rhaenyra, as it would keep in line with all Targaryen customs and unify their fractured house under her son's rule. This was rejected by Viserys, because by that point he had caught on. Once Otto Hightower left the capital, it became immensely clear to Viserys that his daughter's claim was already under attack, and from his wife's family no less. Rhaenyra was reaching that age where marriage would become a necessity, and Viserys had already rejected Alicent's suggestion of marrying her to Aegon because of the age gap and the fact that they had never gotten along. He needed to do something to ensure that the blood of the dragon stayed atop the Iron Throne, but also find a way to project strength to the realm. So he decided to marry Rhaenyra to Sir Laenor Velaryon instead, and opened up the path to newer, deeper, and irreparable rifts between the princess and the queen. By the time Aegon was nearing manhood, he came to resent his half-sister and all her offspring for displacing him in the line of succession. And by 13, he was openly belligerent towards Rhaenyra. Being the eldest, we can assume that he continued to preach his mother's gospel to his siblings and turned them against their nephews. Aegon also discovered, either through someone else or sheer observation and deduction, that Rhaenyra's kids were Harwin Strongs, which made his own claim to the throne that much stronger. He shared this information with his brother Aemond, who used it in a confrontation between himself and his 3 nephews, resulting in the beginning of the end for House Strong. By the time he came of age, Prince Aegon had already built himself a reputation as an indulgent individual, given to gluttony on the table, swilling wine and pinching and fondling serving women at the Red Keep without discrimination. He was always described as having a sulky look, with sullen eyes, a pouty mouth, and a wispy excuse of a mustache. All accounts agreed that by no measure of the stick did Prince Aegon look like a warrior, but he was a handsome man nonetheless, with the true feathers of a Targaryen dragon lord, and he even resembled his own father Viserys, something none of Rhaenyra's children could claim. So despite being the 3rd person to be considered Viserys' heir after Daemon and Rhaenyra, Aegon was the one with the best claim because most circumstances favoured him. He was the king's oldest son. He had modelled Valyrian looks, he lived in the capital for one thing, and he was also bonded with perhaps the most beautiful dragon of the known world. By 120 AC, Aegon had claimed Sunfire the Golden as his mount, and both rider and dragon would go down in infamy. Sunfire was hatched on Dragonstone and was described as having been a young dragon when Aegon claimed him, but massive and merciless nonetheless, with his size and temperament making him the perfect fit for warfare. And though Prince Aegon did not look like a warrior, that does not mean that he did not have a warrior's spirit. Like King Aegon I, King Maegor the Cruel, and even Jaehaerys the Consolator, Prince Aegon would always take to the field to defend and protect his kingdom. But the context of it will always be a debate, and no matter how you decide to cut it, Aegon is not coming out of this one looking nice. Marriage, children, bastards, and burnings. King Aegon II's ascension. When Aegon turned 15, he was married to his younger sister, Helaena, in accordance with Targaryen custom. But he had already tasted fatherhood by then. Prince had 2 acknowledged bastards by the time he married Helaena. One he had sired on one of his mother's handmaids, and the other he had gotten on a girl whose maidenhead he won at the streets of Silk. So clearly Aegon had a bit of a promiscuity problem, but it appeared as though his wife did not exactly mind. Princess Helaena was a beloved figure in King's Landing, a rare distinction for Alicent's children, and tolerated Aegon's dalliances before marriage, and possibly during it as well. Within a year of their marriage, the royal couple welcomed twins, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, into the world, named in honour of their paternal great-grandsire, while the prince also counted at least 2 bastards in his personal brood. When Aegon's true-born children came forth into this world, singers and courtiers alike exclaimed that now Viserys' throne was secured twice over, but the princeling was still not his father's official heir. That even forced her children to study, train, and pray with his own children through Alicent. The 6 royal princes and princesses would attend balls, feasts, training sessions, and even study lessons together. But it only served to drive them apart. Prince Daeron and Prince Jacaerys were raised as milk brothers, and yet the rivalry between the Blacks and the Greens kept deepening, and almost boiled over in 127 AC. During a royal ceremony, Jace asked his aunt Helaena for a dance, the same year in which her 3rd son by Aegon Maelor was born. The prince, who had no special interest in his wife, but was constantly described as a grasping individual, took grave offence at this and escalated matters with his nephew. It is said that if the King's Guard did not have intervened, things would have most certainly ended in tragedy for the royal house. The 7 years that Aegon and Helaena spent married before the outbreak of the dance were the most tense years of Viserys' reign, and even courtiers would take note of the fact that the dragons of the Blacks and Greens would snap and spit fire at each other in close proximity. Though Prince Aegon had the flashiest dragon and the fanciest of women at his disposal, it doesn't look like he was serious about becoming king at all, because after Viserys passed away, he had to be convinced to take his father's crown. Accounts differ as to whom Aegon was with at the time. Some say he was with a whore in a flea bottom, while others say he was with his paramour in his own chambers, but all agree that he was abed with a woman that was not his lawful wife when Sir Criston Cole walked in and made him see the truth of the matter. He told Aegon that if he did not accept the crown, his life and that of his brothers would be forfeit, and Septon Eustace insists that is why the princeling accepted the crown. So 10 days after the King Viserys' passing, his son Aegon was crowned instead of his daughter Rhaenyra. Sir Criston Cole placed Aegon the Conqueror's crown upon his charge's head and proclaimed him Aegon II, earning himself the sobriquet Kingmaker for his efforts. As a king, Aegon would have a reign mirrored with controversy, brutality, espionage, and death. So much death that the Seven Kingdoms has never seen such destruction since, and we're just removed from the War of the Five Kings in the main series. For his own part, King Aegon was not known to be prudent or patient. He preferred to strike first, strike hard, and make his victory known, or burn his enemies to the ground if he couldn't win against them. He is the only Targaryen king known in history to have changed his royal standard to match his own dragon's colouring, and that is reflective of his entire personality as a human being. If you don't know the importance of certain metals in the symbolism of ice and fire, go check out our video on why Rhaenyra's jewellery is important, and you'll see what we already know. Coming back to the king himself, Aegon would start off his reign on his 2 feet and seated upon his golden steed with his golden banner. By its end, his body would be twisted, burnt, and deformed. He would be impotent and incapable of walking, lose his wife to madness and children to warfare, and his own life to treachery because of just how foolhardy his thought processes were. At several points in the story, Aegon is offered the chance to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict, not just from Rhaenyra's side, but his own as well. And yet every time he chooses to extend it, inflict the most amount of damage possible, bloody both sides, and leave neither with a sizable advantage. Though we know from Game of Thrones that Aegon will win the civil war that has inspired House of the Dragon, we don't want to spoil it for you guys by giving it all away. This is an Origins video after all, not a life and times of video. And 2, we want to pivot into discussing how Aegon is a reflection of another Games of Thrones character in the most bizarre way possible. Another vicious idiot boy king, whose words have more bite than his actions, and who'd have benefited as a man had he not listened to his mother as a child. Is Prince Aegon the Joffrey Baratheon of House of the Dragon? Unusually good looking? Check. Charming British accent? Check. 2 siblings and an overbearing mum? Check. Propensity for cruelty and violence? Check, check, and check. It appears as though Prince Aegon Targaryen serves as House of the Dragon's version of Joffrey Baratheon. And you might not think that right now, just because Aegon prefers pleasuring himself, whereas Joffrey did not. Just wait and watch. You'll see what we mean. Though Aegon does not find any joy in cruelly torturing his victims, nor does he flee from the face of battle like a coward, he does have a few things in common with Cersei's favourite baby boy. For one, he is the eldest of three, with his second sibling being a sister, just like Tommen, Marcella and Joffrey. Sure, he also has a fourth brother, Daeron, in the books, but he seems to have been cut from the show, and in Game of Thrones, Cersei apparently did have a son with Robert, but he died before he lived into adulthood. So when you big picture this scenario, Aegon is the same role as Joffrey was in terms of siblings. He is also being groomed for kingship by an overbearing mother who lacks her father's political expertise to help guide him in the right direction. Only Alicent Hightower is not nearly as prone to psychopathic antics as Cersei Lannister is. He has a highly dismissive attitude towards his siblings, just like Joff, and looks like he would love to be anywhere but with them. And his cruelty, though more subtle and cerebral, is cruelty nonetheless, and only increases in its scale and scope as the years go by. In episode 6, we saw Aegon pleasuring himself on a window balcony after embarrassing his brother Aemond with a pig dressed as a dragon, and calling it Pink Dread to mock him further. When his mother walks in on him and asks him if it was his plot, he squarely lays the blame on Jace and Luke, and can't even remember Luke's name right. He was unbothered when Jace was bonding with Vermax, yawning as if he'd rather be anywhere else in the world, and he had just manipulated Jace and Luke to the extent that they were unaware of the fact that they were being used as pawns in his scheme to hurt Aemond, and that he himself cared little for them. The key difference between Joffrey and Aegon is that the latter knows his privilege and how to work it into his favour, whereas the former only knows how to throw it in people's faces and expect them to cower in awe. The point where their characters intersect is when Joff brings up Rhaenyra's death to his wife to be Marjorie in the Great Sept of Baelor, because the brothers he talks about in that scene is none other than Aegon himself. And both Joff and Aegon don't exactly frown upon kinslaying. Joffrey threatens to have his uncle Tyrion killed, arrested, and otherwise made to suffer through the seven hells because he doesn't exactly care about taboos and sins. When Aegon's brother Aemond returns to King's Landing after running an errand that entails a similar kind of event unfolding, instead of attaining his brother, Aegon throws a massive feast in his honour, celebrating his kingslaying ways instead of punishing them. The only reason you are going to like Aegon more than Joffrey is because the lad has testes of steel. Most kings who talk a big talk fall short of backing it up with their actions, but Aegon didn't make an effort at the very least. He personally went into the field during a dragon involving civil war and kept fighting for his birthright even after well over 50% of his body had essentially become useless. He would be burned, have his ribs broken, legs shattered, and feel his armour melt into his own skin thanks to dragon flame. But he would live through it all and see the war reach its death throes, something his half-sister would never get to do. It will be simply mesmerising watching Aegon Targaryen's journey unfold on the screen. And we don't just say that because he's a promiscuous dude. We say that because he is rightly remembered as one of the worst kings in Westerosi history. And his short, 2-year reign did irreversible damage to House Targaryen's main source of power. Aegon II of his name is a monarch whose reign serves as the biggest reminder that birthright does not make a good king, temperament does. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.